The smell hit me first. Not the familiar, comforting scent of old wood, oil, and memories. No, this was the sharp, sterile sting of industrial cleaner. The kind of smell that promises a clean slate by erasing everything that came before it. I stood in the doorway of my own garage, my own workshop, and I didn't recognize the air. My hand was still on the doorknob, the cold brass a familiar weight. But the space in front of me was alien. It was empty. Not just tidy. Not just organized, the way my son Michael always said it should be. It was vacant. The long workbench my father and I had built from reclaimed barnwood, the one that bore the scars of 60 years of projects, was gone. The pegboard wall, a chaotic but perfect mosaic of tools, was stripped bare. Holes and faded outlines were all that remained, like ghosts of things that once had purpose. My father's brace and bit set, the one he brought home after the war, with its dark, oiled wood handles worn smooth by his hands and then by mine. Gone. The set of chisels I'd bought myself with my first real paycheck, each one sharpened and honed with a devotion that bordered on prayer. Gone. The heavy cast-iron vise that had held every piece of wood for every school project my son ever had. Every birdhouse. Every pine wood derby car. Every wobbly bookshelf. Gone. My feet felt nailed to the concrete floor. My breath was a small, tight thing in my chest. I walked forward slowly. My boots made a hollow sound that had never been there before. The concrete floor had been scrubbed. The dark, familiar stains of spilled varnish and motor oil, maps of a lifetime of work, had been bleached away into pale, meaningless blotches. They had even painted the walls. A flat, lifeless gray. The kind of gray you see in catalogs for storage solutions. A place for things, not a place for work. A place to hide things you don't want to look at. My gaze drifted to the corner where my old tool cabinet had stood. It had been my father's, a heavy, steel behemoth painted a cheerful, chipped red. Each drawer had its own sound, a specific groan and squeak that told me what was inside without having to look. The top drawer held the delicate things, calipers, marking gauges, a fine-toothed Japanese saw that could cut a sliver of wood so thin you could read through it. The bottom drawers held the heavy hitters, the sledgehammer, the wrecking bars, the big pipe wrenches. It was a library of capability, a history of problems solved. In its place stood a sleek, silver cabinet made of thin, flimsy metal. It looked like something you buy on a website, delivered in a flat box. Impersonal. Weak. I walked over to it and pulled open a drawer. It moved silently, on cheap plastic runners. Inside, nestled in a pre-cut foam tray, was a brand-new set of shiny, chrome-plated tools. The wrenches were all the same length. The screwdrivers had identical rubber handles. There was no history in them. No soul. They were a stranger's tools. A gift, I was sure they'd call it. An upgrade. I closed the drawer. The click was soft and unsatisfying. My eyes scanned the empty space, searching for something, anything that was mine. Dash. And then I saw it. Over by the new, sterile trash can, a single, solitary object on the clean-swept floor. A small, flat washer. I walked over and bent down, my knees cracking in protest. I picked it up. It was a number 10 brass washer. I knew it instantly. It was from the small, section box of hardware my father had kept. A box I had used just last week to fix the hinge on the back gate. They had missed one. One tiny, insignificant piece of my life. I closed my fist around it. The metal was cool against my palm. I stood there, in the middle of my empty, silent garage, and I didn't feel rage. Rage is a hot, loud thing. This was cold. It was a quiet, clarifying cold that spread from my chest outwards. It was the feeling of a locked tumbler falling precisely into place. Click. They had done this. Michael and his wife, Karen. They had been here for the weekend. To help me get organized, they'd said. I had gone out for my regular Saturday morning coffee with Sal and the boys down at the diner. A ritual they always complained about. You could just make coffee here, Dad. They didn't understand that it wasn't about the coffee. It was about the worn vinyl of the booth, the low murmur of conversation, the comfortable silence between old friends who had nothing left to prove to each other. I had come home, and they were just leaving. Karen gave me a quick, air kiss near my cheek that smelled of expensive soap. "We got so much done, Frank. You'll love it," she chirped. Michael had clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be affectionate, but felt more like a jockey patting a horse. "Cleared out a lot of that old junk in the garage for you, Dad. Made it safe. You can actually park a car in there now." Old junk. I had nodded. I had smiled. I had learned a long time ago that arguing was pointless. It was like throwing pebbles at a tank. They would just roll their eyes and talk to each other later, in hushed tones, about how I was getting difficult. So I just nodded and waved as their oversized, silver sport utility vehicle pulled out of my driveway. I hadn't gone out to the garage then. I had made myself some lunch. I had watched the baseball game on television. I let their words sit there, waiting. Part of me, I think, didn't want to know. Part of me wanted to believe that clearing out junk meant they'd finally thrown away the stacks of old newspapers I kept for lighting the grill. But I knew. Deep down, in a place that didn't use words, I knew. And now, standing here, with this single brass washer in my hand, the knowing was complete. They didn't see tools. They didn't see my father's hands, or my hands, or the legacy of a man who could fix anything that was broken. They saw junk. They saw clutter. They saw a mess that interfered with their clean, minimalist aesthetic. They saw an old man's sentimentality as a problem to be managed, a liability. I turned and walked out of the garage, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't slam it. The quiet click was more final. I went into the house. The silence in here was different. This was my silence, not theirs. I walked through the living room, past the photos on the mantelpiece. A wedding photo of Michael and Karen, both of them with impossibly white teeth. A photo of my grandson, Leo, looking uncomfortable in his suit at his high school graduation. A photo of me and my late wife, Mary, taken 30 years ago at the lake. Her smile was the only thing in the room that felt real. I went into the kitchen. I filled the kettle with water and set it on the stove. I spooned coffee grounds into the French press. Strong black coffee. No sugar, no cream. The way I've always had it. The way my father had it. As I waited for the water to boil, I stood at the window and looked out at the backyard. The lawn needed mowing. The bird feeder was empty. Small tasks. The kind of tasks that fill a life. I thought about other times. The time they simplified my finances, setting up automatic payments and direct deposits, taking my checkbook away because, as Karen said, it's just so much easier this way, Frank. You don't have to worry about a thing. I remembered the mild panic I felt not having that worn leather book in my pocket. The loss of that small, physical ritual of balancing my own accounts. They saw it as a kindness. I saw it as another piece of myself being filed away. I thought about the last Christmas when they'd bought me a new television. A giant flat screen with a dozen remote controls and 1,000 settings I didn't understand. They'd taken away my old console television, the one I'd had for 20 years, the one with the 2 simple knobs for volume and channel. "It's high definition, Dad. You'll see the game so much better." Now I couldn't figure out how to get to the right channel half the time. The screen would flash with menus and options I didn't ask for. They hadn't given me a gift. They had given me a chore. And they had taken away something that worked. The whistle of the kettle cut through the silence. I poured the hot water over the coffee grounds. I watched the dark liquid swirl and bloom. I set the timer for 4 minutes. Exactly 4 minutes. In those 4 minutes, a lifetime of small erosions coalesced into a single, hard truth. I was not a person to them. I was a project, a problem to be solved, a set of assets to be managed, a house to be inherited. My memories, my preferences, my history, it was all just old junk to be cleared out to make way for their more efficient, more modern, more sensible way of life. The timer dinged. I pressed the plunger down on the coffee press, slowly, firmly. The separation of grounds from liquid. The clarity. I poured the coffee into my favorite mug, the heavy ceramic one the VFW post had given me for 10 years of service as quartermaster. It had a small chip on the rim, right where my lip rested. I knew it by feel. I took a sip. It was hot and bitter and good. I opened a fist that had been clenched since I left the garage. The brass washer sat in the center of my palm, a small, golden circle. It wasn't a piece of junk. It was an anchor. It was a reminder. It was the one thing they had left behind. And it was enough. I set my mug down on the counter. I walked into my small office, the room Mary used to use for her sewing. I sat down at my old, heavy oak desk. The one thing in the house they hadn't tried to replace yet. It was too big, too heavy, too much trouble. I opened the bottom drawer on the left. It was stiff. I had to jiggle it just right. I knew its secrets. Inside was a sturdy metal lockbox. The key was in the small, carved wooden bowl on the desk, hidden beneath a collection of old pens and paper clips. I unlocked the box. The lid opened with a satisfying metallic sigh. Inside were the important papers. My birth certificate, my honorable discharge from the Army, Mary's death certificate, our marriage license, and a thick sheaf of legal documents, held together with a binder clip. My will, the power of attorney I had signed over to Michael 5 years ago, after my heart scare, and the deed to this house. I had put it in a trust with Michael and Karen as the sole beneficiaries upon my death. It was all neat and tidy, all simplified, as they would say. I had done it to make things easier for them. I had spent a good portion of my later years trying to make things easier for them, trying not to be a burden. And in return, they had made me invisible. They had erased me from my own life, one helpful gesture at a time. The cold feeling from the garage had now settled deep in my bones. It wasn't anger. It was purpose. It was the steady, calm resolve of a man who finally understood the terms of the arrangement. I took out the papers related to the trust and the deed. The paper was thick and important. The language was full of wherefores and heretofores, but the meaning was simple. When I am gone, this house, this property, this last piece of my physical existence on earth belongs to them. The house my father built, the yard where I taught my son to throw a baseball, the garden where Mary grew her roses. It would all be theirs, to do with as they pleased, to gut, to remodel, to sell to the highest bidder, to erase, just as they had erased my workshop. I looked at the signature line, my own name, signed in a hand that was still steady back then. A signature of trust, a signature of love, a signature, I now realized, of foolishness. I stood up. I took the papers and walked back into the kitchen. My coffee was still warm. I took another sip. Then I went to the small closet by the back door, where I kept the office supplies I still allowed myself. Behind the vacuum cleaner was a small, black paper shredder. I had bought it a few years ago to destroy old bank statements and credit card offers. Karen had laughed when she saw it. "Oh, Frank, nobody needs these anymore. Everything is digital. It's so much safer." But I had kept it. I plugged it in. The motor whirred to life, a low, hungry sound. I took the first page of the trust document. I didn't hesitate. I fed it into the slot. The machine chewed it up, spitting out thin, cross-cut ribbons of confetti into the plastic bin. The sound was incredibly satisfying. Page by page, I erased their future. I shredded the deed. I shredded the trust agreement. I shredded every legal tie that bound this property to their inheritance. When I was done, the bin was full of my quiet declaration of independence. I unplugged the machine. The silence that returned was deeper, more profound. I felt lighter. The weight of their expectations, of my own misplaced sense of obligation, was gone. I finished my coffee. Then I went back to my desk. I took out a piece of plain white paper and a good pen, the one with the black ink that flowed smoothly. I wrote a list. My handwriting was a little shaky now, the letters not as firm as they once were. But the words were clear. 1. Call a lawyer. 2. Bank. Revoke POA. 3. New will. On Monday morning, I did not go to the diner. I drank my coffee at home, standing at the kitchen window. At 9 o'clock sharp, I picked up the telephone. Not my cell phone, the one Michael insisted I carry for emergencies, the one I could barely operate. I used the old, heavy, beige telephone that sat on the small table in the hallway. It had a reassuring weight in my hand. I dialed the number for a lawyer I'd found in the phone book. A man named Mr. Peterson, whose office was downtown in the old brick building by the courthouse. His advertisement was small and discreet. Nos mailing photograph. Just his name and the words estate planning and elder law. A woman with a calm, professional voice answered. I asked to make an appointment. She had an opening that afternoon. For what purpose, sir? She had asked politely. A complete overhaul, I said. There was a brief pause. Very good, mister. It's Frank, I said. Just Frank. Next, I drove to the bank. I walked past the young tellers in their crisp uniforms and went straight to the office of the branch manager, a man named Jim who had been there for 30 years. He knew my name. He stood up when I came in. Frank, good to see you. Everything all right? Everything is about to be, I said. I sat down in the padded chair across from his big, tidy desk. I need to make some changes to my accounts, Jim. I explained what I wanted to do. I wanted to revoke my son's power of attorney. I wanted to remove him as a signatory on my checking account. I wanted to open a new savings account in my name only and transfer the majority of my funds into it. He listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. He didn't ask why. He didn't offer advice. He simply nodded, swiveled in his chair, and began typing at his computer. There will be some forms to sign, of course, he said. I have my own pen, I told him. He printed the documents. I read each one carefully. The language was dense, but the intent was clear. I was reclaiming what was mine. I signed my name in the designated boxes. My hand did not tremble. This will become effective immediately, Jim said, stamping the papers with a heavy, satisfying thud. Your son will no longer have access to these accounts. Good, I said. Will you be wanting new checks printed? Yes, I said, and a checkbook register. One of the spiral-bound ones. He smiled, a small, genuine smile. I think we still have a few of those in the back. I walked out of the bank and did not look back. The lawyer's office smelled of old paper and wood polish. Mr. Peterson was a man about my age, with tired eyes and a well-worn suit. He didn't waste time with small talk. He gestured for me to sit, and he listened. I told him everything, not with emotion. I stated the facts. The gradual transfer of control over my life. The simplifying. The organizing. The workshop. I told him about my father's tools. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, looking at his hands, which were folded on the desk in front of him. I see, he said finally. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say my children were monsters. He simply acknowledged my reality. What is it you want to do, Frank? I want a new will, I said. A simple one. I want to leave my house and all my assets to a charity. I had thought about it all morning. Which charity? He asked, picking up a pen. The local high school, I said. I want to set up a scholarship fund for kids who want to go into the trades. Woodworking, mechanics, welding. The kids who want to learn to build things and fix things. He wrote it down. And your son? My son has been well compensated for his time, I said. I want him to receive $1. Legally, so he cannot contest the will on the grounds of being forgotten. Mr. Peterson nodded slowly. This is a significant change, Frank. Are you certain? I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I said. We spent the next hour working out the details. He was thorough, professional. He explained the process, the legal requirements, the notifications that would have to be sent. When I left his office, the sun was low in the sky. I felt like I had just completed the most important day's work of my life. I went home. I didn't turn on the television. I went into the living room and began my own process of clearing out the junk. I took the wedding photograph of Michael and Karen from the mantelpiece. I didn't smash it. I didn't throw it away. I opened the back, removed the photo, and placed it face down in a desk drawer. I put a picture of my old Army unit in the frame instead. A group of skinny, scared kids try to look tough. Men I trusted with my life. I did the same with the other photos of them around the house. I replaced them with pictures of my parents, of Mary, on my old fishing boat. I was reclaiming my own history. I was making my house my own again. The first phone call came on Wednesday. It was Michael. His name flashed up on the screen of the cell phone. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. A minute later, a text message appeared. Dad, my debit card for your account was declined at the gas station. Is something wrong? Call me. I read the message. Then I deleted it. Not replied. Deleted. It was a small act, but it felt momentous. The power of the delete button. An hour later, another call. I let it go to voicemail again. The message he left this time was more urgent. His voice was tight with annoyance. Dad, I'm trying to pay your utility bill online, and it says my access is denied. What's going on? Did you forget to pay something? Call me back. This is a mess. I deleted the message without listening to the end. The third call came that evening. It was Karen. Her voice was syrupy sweet, dripping with false concern. Frank, honey, are you okay? We've been trying to reach you. Michael is worried something has happened. Please just give us a call and let us know you're all right. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about their access. They were worried about their control. I deleted her message, too. Then I blocked both their numbers. The silence that followed was wonderful. The next day, I went to the hardware store. I walked through the aisles, breathing in the familiar smells of sawdust and paint and fertilizer. I didn't buy a lot. I bought one high-quality Japanese pull saw, a good combination square, a block plane with a satisfying heft, a single hammer with a smooth hickory handle. I was not trying to replace what I had lost. That was impossible. I was starting over. I took my new tools home and went into the garage. I ignored the shiny, soulless cabinet. I went to the lumber yard and bought a few planks of good, clear pine. And I started to build a new workbench. A small one. Just for me. The work was slow. My back ached. My hands were not as strong as they once were. But the feel of the saw cutting through the wood, the scent of fresh pine, the satisfaction of a square and true joint, that was still there. It was a language my body had never forgotten. On Saturday, my grandson Leo stopped by. He was a good kid. Quiet, thoughtful. He had his grandmother's eyes. He found me in the garage, planing the edge of a board. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes taking in the empty walls, the new, smaller bench. Whoa, he said. What happened in here? Your father helped me get organized, I said, without stopping my work. Leo was silent for a moment. He knew me better than that. He walked over and looked at the new, silver cabinet. He opened a drawer and looked at the shiny, new tools inside. He closed it. Where are Grandpa Great's tools? He asked. His voice was soft. Your father thought they were junk, I said. He had them hauled away. Leo just stood there. I could see the understanding dawning on his face. And the anger. It was an anger he felt on my behalf. He what? Leo whispered. But we were going to fix up that old radio cabinet. You were going to show me how to use the hand router. I stopped planing. I looked at him. The hand router is gone, Leo. It's all gone. He sat down on a nearby stool, looking at the bare concrete floor. I'm sorry, Grandpa, he said. He had no right. That was your history. Tears welled up in my eyes. The first I had shed through this whole ordeal. It wasn't for the tools. It was for this boy who saw, who understood. I just nodded, unable to speak. Mom and Dad are freaking out, he said after a minute. They can't get a hold of you. They said they're going to drive down here this weekend if you don't call them. I'll be here, I said. Is there anything I can do? He asked. Yes, I said, my voice hoarse. You can hand me that combination square. He did. And for the next 2 hours, we worked together on the new bench. I showed him how to measure twice and cut once. I showed him how to mark a line with a knife instead of a pencil for a cleaner cut. I let him use the new saw. His hands were clumsy, but eager. We didn't talk about his father. We didn't need to. We just worked. And in the shared focus of the task, a new bond was forged. They arrived on Sunday afternoon, as Leo had predicted. Their silver SUV pulled into the driveway, too fast. I was sitting on the front porch, reading the newspaper. I heard the car door slam. I folded my paper neatly and set it beside me. I did not stand up. Michael came up the walk first, his face a mask of frustration. Karen followed, her arms crossed, her expression one of deep injury. "Dad," Michael said, his voice loud in the quiet afternoon. "What the hell is going on? We've been trying to reach you for days. We were worried sick." "I'm fine, Michael," I said calmly. "Phoenix, you blocked our numbers. You locked us out of the accounts. The bank manager called me. Said you revoked my power of attorney. What are you thinking?" Karen stepped forward. "Frank, is this about the garage? Because if it is, I think you're overreacting. We were just trying to help. That place was a death trap." I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw a woman who was so wrapped up in her own good intentions that she was blind to the cruelty of her actions. "You threw away my father's tools," I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. "Oh, for God's sake, Dad," Michael exploded. "It was a pile of rusty junk. It was worthless. I got you a whole new set. Better tools. You don't get to decide what is worthless to me," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his anger like a sharp chisel. "This is ridiculous," Michael said, shaking his head. "You're doing this just to punish us." "No," I said. "Punishment is not the point. This is about consequences. You made a decision about my property, about my life, without consulting me. So I have made some decisions about my own." Karen's face hardened. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, looking from her face to my son's, "that my finances are now my own concern. My property is my own concern. My life is my own concern. The arrangement we had is over." Michael stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He looked like a man who had just been told the rules of a game he thought he was winning had been changed without his knowledge. "You can't do this," he stammered. You're not. You're not capable of managing everything on your own anymore. You made sure of that, didn't you?" I replied, a hint of steel in my voice. "For years, you've been chipping away at my independence, convincing me I needed your help, convincing yourselves you were doing the right thing. But you were just making it easier for yourselves. You weren't taking care of me. You were taking over." I stood up slowly. We were on the same level now. "The house," Karen said suddenly, her voice sharp. "The trust. You can't change that." I almost smiled. "I already have," I said. "The house, the land, everything. It's no longer your concern." The color drained from Michael's face. "What did you do?" "I did what you taught me to do," I said. "I cleared out the old junk. I simplified things." I turned and walked to the front door. I opened it. "I think this visit is over." They just stood there, on my porch, stunned into silence. "Goodbye, Michael." "Goodbye, Karen." And I closed the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it gently and turned the deadbolt. The click was the sound of my new life beginning. The next few weeks were quiet. I received a letter from a lawyer representing my son, full of blustering threats and legal jargon. I passed it on to Mr. Peterson, who handled it. I learned that contesting a will before the testator is deceased is not a thing. Apparently, I was still allowed to do as I pleased with my own property. A novel concept. Leo continued to visit. He never mentioned his parents. He just came, and we worked. We finished the workbench. We built a birdhouse. We started fixing up an old wooden chair that had been in the attic for years. I was teaching him what my father had taught me. The value of patience. The dignity of working with your hands. The quiet joy of making something broken whole again. One afternoon, he brought me a gift. It was a small canvas tool roll. Inside was a set of old carbon steel chisels with darkwood handles. They were worn, but well cared for. "I found them at a flea market," he said, looking at his feet. "I know they're not the same, but..." I picked one up. The balance was perfect. The steel held a keen edge. It had a history. It had a soul. "Thank you, Leo," I said, my voice thick. "They're exactly the same." My life found a new rhythm. It was a simple one. Coffee in the morning. Work in the garage. Lunch. A walk in the afternoon. Reading in the evening. I reconnected with my old friends of the diner. Sal clapped me on the back when I walked in after a long absence. Thought you'd fallen off the earth, Frank, he grumbled, sliding into the booth across from me. Just had to get organized, I said. He looked at me, his old eyes sharp. He saw the change, the lightness in my shoulders. He just nodded. About time, he said. I started a new project in the workshop. A grandfather clock. It was ambitious, complex. It required precision and patience. I didn't know if I would live to finish it. It didn't matter. The work was the point. The act of creation. The process of bringing something of beauty and function into the world, piece by piece. One day, a letter arrived in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was Michael's. I recognized the impatient scrawl. I sat on the kitchen table. I did not open it. I made my coffee. I sat at the table and looked at the envelope while I drank. I was not afraid of what was inside. I was not angry. I was just calm. Whatever it was, a plea or a threat or an apology, it didn't matter. It couldn't change what had happened. It couldn't change the decision I had made. My life was my own now. The terms were no longer negotiable. After I finished my coffee, I picked up the letter. I walked out to the garage, to my new workbench. The clock mechanism I had ordered was on the bench, a beautiful, intricate thing of brass gears and weights. Beside it lay the chisels Leo had given me. I was no longer a man waiting for his life to be over. I was a man with work to do. I placed the unopened letter on the bench. Maybe I would read it later. Maybe I wouldn't. For now, the sun was streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The smell of cedar filled the room. I picked up a piece of wood. It was time to get back to work. The hands of a clock don't move backwards. Neither do I.